I spent all my teen years lost as fuck, not knowing what to do, who I was supposed to become. All right, what's happening, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another video. Today, I wanted to spend some time talking about my Uncle Brett, and I wanted to share some things with you guys about my Uncle Brett. You know, he was a real uncle. It wasn't like, this is not some made up story that I'm just kind of like fabricating to deliver a message. And I'm gonna give you some context, some background into where I was at a certain time of my life, the learnings that I got during that time from him. And like I said, my uncle had passed away. He passed away this year, only a few months ago. I think it was in his 60s. You don't really reflect on what people mean to your life until you lose them. You know, I've had multiple losses in my life, and each time I've spent to kind of reflect on the purpose of the relationship I had with these people and what I learned from that. You know, I learn each time. It doesn't really get easier. You just get better at dealing with the loss and the grief and the grieving process. I feel like part of my grieving process is creating this video to pass on my learnings from my uncle, and hopefully, you know, you guys can take something from this as well. So just to give you a bit of background context, when I was 5, my dad passed away from a heart attack. He was 55 at the time, and he didn't look after himself. He was very unhealthy, typical, you know, Aussie, loved beer and meat pies. Fitness was a part of his lifestyle, you know, had a big beer belly, you know, unhealthy and all that stuff. And, you know, he passed away from a heart attack. From then on, when I was around 10, my mum remarried, and I had a terrible relationship with my stepfather. He wasn't technically my stepfather, as he never adopted me legally, but I just call him my stepfather for the sake of, you know, the narrative. And, you know, we had a terrible relationship. You know, it's like one of those Disney step-parent relationships where, you know, he's the evil stepdad. I don't want to shit on him too much. You know, I feel like at this point in my life, I've found peace with him, and I've forgiven him, and I've moved on, and I've been grateful for the things that he has given me, which was a roof over my head, food, you know, formal education, as well as one of the best gifts, which was my younger brother. I'm grateful for that, and I've moved on. But, you know, during that time when I was a teenager, especially, because I feel like at that age, you know, most young boys in their teen years need a father figure, a mentor, a guidance, more than anything in their life. And I didn't have that. And I didn't find it within him. And I spent most of pretty much all my teen years lost as fuck, not knowing what to do, who I was supposed to become. I had no moral compass. I got into a lot of trouble, a lot of petty crime, and I was just a public nuisance, a juvenile delinquent. So when I was 17, my stepdad actually kicked me out of the house. He left me a letter on my bed one day saying, I want you out of my house. You can stay, but if you are gonna stay, you have to give me $50 rent every week, and you gotta leave it on top of the microwave and not tell your mum. And if you tell your mum, I'm gonna kick you out anyway. So I was kind of like given this ultimatum, and I don't know if it was pride or ego, or maybe a part of me just wanted to get the fuck out of there anyway. I decided to leave, right? So long story short, I packed what I could into a backpack and I left, and I was 17. So this was the year 2000. I don't know what the fuck I was doing, but all I knew was that I didn't want to stay there. You know, it was the year 2000. I just finished high school. So year 12 wrapped up around October, and I was like, fuck this, I'm getting kicked out because there's no way I'm paying this guy $50. I worked at Macca's at the time for like $5.25 an hour. So $50 was a bit of cash for me. But regardless, I either had an ego or I just didn't want to stay there anyway. I left, packed my bag, and for 9 days, I basically, you know, I used the word homeless. At the time, I didn't think I was homeless, but it is the definition of a homeless. Had nowhere to go. For the most part, was just couch surfing. So I stayed at friends' houses on couches until the 9th day, when I just basically ran out of cash and was like, fuck it, I can't keep doing this. Like I worked at Macca's, like I said, like I gotta be able to wash my clothes and go to work properly somehow. I can't keep living like this. So I walked up to Lidcombe Station, and we didn't have iPhones back then. I had a Nokia, but I had no credit. So I had coins, and I went up to the payphone at Lidcombe Station, and I called my auntie Melly, or my tita Melly, because my auntie's Filipino. And I basically said to her, look, you know, I've just got kicked out of the house by my stepdad. She knew, obviously she knows who he is. This is my auntie. This is my mum's sister. So my direct auntie, not like a friend of the family or anything like that. This was my actual auntie who I loved dearly. Yeah, I told her what happened, and she basically said, oh my God, this is terrible. I remember her saying, I want to hit him with a baseball bat. Now, if you can imagine a Filipino angry woman with an accent saying that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. She cared for me a lot, and she loved me very much. And she basically said, you know, I hate this guy. I can't believe he did this. And I said, can I come stay at your place? She goes, where are you now? I go, I'm at Lidcombe station. She goes, get on the train and come to my place now. So she lived in Glenfield, which is, if you know Sydney, if you're from Western Sydney, you know Glenfield is like, I think it's like a couple of stations past Liverpool station. So it's out west. I think it's like just past Casula. I haven't been in the area for a while since then. So maybe things have changed. But back then it was like a couple of stations past Liverpool, the next stop after Casula station. And Casula back then, 25 years ago, was an absolute ghost town of a train station. Not many trains stopped there, but the next stop after Casula, I'm pretty sure was Glenfield station. So my auntie lived there. She lived on Harrow Road. Okay, so, and that Harrow Road was basically like a 20-minute walk, 25-minute walk from the station. So basically caught the train out to Glenfield and walked to my auntie's place. And she welcomed me, you know, she welcomed me into the house with open arms, and so did my uncle Brett, who was her husband. And I lived there for like a year and a bit. It was, you know, I was just rolling with the punches. I had no direction in what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't get into uni. I wasn't like an academically smart person. I finished year 12, but I got like I don't know, 50 or 60 or something like that for my UAI, which is what the marking criteria was back then. Yeah, so I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I didn't get into uni. I applied. I didn't get into TAFE. I applied. I was working at Macca's at the time, Lidcombe Macca's. Okay, so I was still working there, and that's all I pretty much had on my plate. So I was living in Glenfield you know, my auntie had two kids that were very young at the time, and I took one of their rooms, Jeff, my cousin, and she ended up putting Jeff in my other cousin's room, and they slept together in the same room, and I slept in my own room, right? So they accommodated for me, and they took me in, and they were like, you know, stay as long as you need to, whatever. And I basically just got settled there, and still working at Lidcombe Macca's as often as I could. I was working basically full-time hours there, so I would wake up at 3:15, okay, because I was doing morning shift at Macca's. I was doing open, which was, you know, I had to be there at 5 a.m. So long story short, you know, my routine was like basically waking up at 3:15, chucking clothes on, walking down to Glenfield station, and it was still nighttime, obviously, jumping on the first train that was available, that started, basically the first train on the timetable that took me straight to Lidcombe, and I'd get to Lidcombe Macca's right on time. And that was my routine. My uncle was basically, I would say, one of the first, if not the first, father figures I really had as a teenager, and probably ever had as a teenager, which is why I'm telling this story and why I'm kind of sharing this with you guys, because it's really profound for me, and it's an important kind of milestone for my life, because I didn't have father figures, like I said. My uncle and my auntie at the time had what I would consider my first kind of ideas of what a healthy marriage / family looked like. They, you know, they weren't perfect, but they got along. They loved each other. They showed each other that they loved each other. They showed affection in front of the kids, in front of everyone together. He really was, for me, the ideal male. And I still look back at that time. They were, for me, what the ideal family looked like, right? They worked together. They both ran a curtain business and interior furnishings business together, where she would design and fabricate and he would go and install. You know, that's what they basically did. They worked together. They were an amazing team, and I really looked up to what they had, because I hadn't experienced that I can't remember if I ever experienced that. I know that my house wasn't as functional. My home that I grew up in wasn't as functional as theirs, and my parents didn't have a functional kind of marriage in that way, because obviously my parents ended up getting separated. They never got along and all that stuff. But my auntie and my uncle Brett had, for me, the picture perfect family that at that time, I thought to myself, this is great. This is what I should strive to kind of, you know, the level that I should strive to hit one day in my life. So apart from the fact that my uncle was a father figure and a mentor, and really was my first kind of idea of what a man should be, he taught me a whole bunch of little things when I lived there that are important. Like, he taught me how to drive a manual car. He helped me buy my first car. He basically said, give me money and I'll save it for you, and taught me how to save and put money aside, and helped me look for my new car. He took me places. He took me to work and showed me what he did when he installed curtains and furnishings and all this stuff. He would pick me up from the station when I needed it. He would always check on me and things like that. So it was just like, you know, a great, it sounds simple, but if you don't have that, you realize what you're missing, or what you've missed out on. And I realized what I missed out on growing up. At the time, I didn't really get it, but now moving forward, then I'm in my 40s, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm older than him, than what he was back then. I think he was in his 30s, 35s or something. Now I'm 42. I look back and go, man, like, he was a great man and did some great things, and really did everything that he could to basically make sure I was set up well and had a good foundation at home, and taught me things that a father should teach his son. And that really resonated with me. So there was a bunch of whole little smaller things, but today I want to talk to you guys about 3 really important learnings that I look back onto now that he's gone, that he instilled in me. And after doing some self-reflection, I definitely want to share these with you guys. And if you can take something from it, fantastic. The first thing I want to share with you guys, and the first thing that I learned from my uncle, is that having a structure is so important. And I'm talking about structure in almost everything that we do. As men, we are going to thrive, okay, and we work best when we have a structure in front of us, right? Whether that's a meal plan structure, a training or exercise structure, a daily structure with work, a monthly structure. There needs to be structure. Now, imagine waking up and not knowing what your day entails, right? If you're one of those guys that wings it, I can guarantee you, you're not living 100% to your potential, okay? Waking up and saying, oh, what have I got to do today? Oh, I'm going to do this, and then I'll have lunch, and then I don't know what we'll do after 12. We'll see what happens. That kind of floating through life, and I'm telling you this from experience, is fucked, right? It's absolutely fucked. You're living up to a fraction of what your potential is, and you're never going to feel accomplished at the end of the day. And when you reflect on, you're not really in a position where you can learn as well, because you're just winging it. You're kind of like an airplane in the sky that doesn't have a GPS. You're just floating around, hoping for the best and seeing where you land. And I don't like winging things like that. And I feel like most men are not going to be working to their 100% productivity and potential if they're just winging it. So what my uncle taught me was having a structure. He didn't teach me this directly. He taught me this just by keeping me accountable. So certain things where he'd actually wake me up every day at a certain time. Like if I wasn't up by 3:15 to go to work, he would come and wake me up. Because I was a teenager, right? If on the weekends when I wasn't working, he woke me up at 7 o'clock every day. He'd come in, he'd knock on my door and say, Phil, time to get up at 7 o'clock. And at the time, I didn't even understand why he was doing it. I was like, dude, it's the fucking weekend, let me sleep in. But he'd wake me up. As much as I'd be pissed off and I'd protest, he'd wake me up. And like I said, as a teenager, I didn't get it. I thought it was pointless and I didn't understand the concept of it. But the one thing that really clicked for me is that we had dinner every night at 7 p.m. as a family. So if I was at home, he'd remind me 7 p.m.'s dinner, we're gonna be at the dinner table. He might even remind me and tell me also, hey, 6:45, can you set the dinner table? You know, if I wasn't home yet because I was still hanging around Lidcombe after work or whatever, he would always ring me and say, are you gonna be home for dinner, 7 p.m.? Are you gonna be home for dinner? And it was either yes, I am, or no, I'm not. And if I was, he was gonna say, great, what time are you gonna be at Glenfield Station? I come pick you up. And it was mandatory for him that we had dinner every single night as a family unit. And like I said, back then, I wasn't, you know, I was aware of this type of stuff, but I never had it. I never lived through it. So I never understood the importance of it. And to be honest, I thought it was kind of a little bit too cozy for my liking, because I was used to the kind of getting my own dinner or having dinner in my bedroom as a teenager, living back at home. But he really reinforced this idea of having a structure and having, you know, bookends to your day. Every day you wake up at the same time, and bookend that at the end of the day where every night you have a dinner time at the same time with the family, okay? And having that structure in place, I feel like really gives you an idea of what your day is gonna be like. Now, as a grown man at the age of 42 with kids and a wife now, I understand how important it is to have a structure to your day, to your week, to your month. Something as minute as having a daily nutrition structure with a calorie goal or a meal plan, whatever it is that you like, a training plan, having your sets laid out. Having that structure means that you wake up and you are so much more ready to smash the day because you know what you're gonna do. You know what you're doing at 11, you know what you're doing at 1, you know what you're doing at 3. Regardless of what time it is, you know what you're gonna do and you know where you're gonna be. And this also helps if you have a wife. When she says, what are you doing at 3 o'clock? You can tell her straight away, I'm gonna be here doing this. If you need me, let me know. Instead of being one of those partners where it's like, I don't know, I'll be home whenever, and when I'm home. Which already you can see, having that structure is gonna give you better communication with your partner. If you don't have it, now there's gonna be broken communication because she's gonna say, what are you doing for lunch? And you say, I don't know. What time are you gonna be home? I don't know. And you're gonna have a better relationship with your wife, better relationship with your family as a unit when you have this communication in place because you've got a structure, okay? And bookending and having dinner at the end of the day to finish off the day as a family unit is the next thing that I wanted to share with you guys, which is one of the learnings, right? The second learning, which is we had dinner every night at 7 p.m. and it wasn't just about food, sitting there and eating together and enjoying a meal together. It was about connection. It was about communication. It was, you know, it's touching base. It was a checkpoint every day. It was more about, you know, how was your day? What did you get up to today? Anything remarkable happened today? Anything interesting happening today? Did something negative happen today? What can you learn from that? And there was that discussion. Because when I was a teenager, I didn't have these 7 p.m. dinner with family, right? We ate kind of on our own. And very rarely did we have dinners. And if we did, you know, we weren't having friendly conversation, positive conversation and talking about our day. So what I learned very quickly was when I was a teenager, if something shitty happened during the day, I would bottle that up, go home and not tell anybody. And then you're sitting there in your own mind trying to figure out how bad is this really? And you don't think about learning something from it. You're just letting it simmer and settle inside you. And you build up this resentment and this negativity and you get angry. Why did this happen to me? And you have difficulty as a teenager navigating these thoughts and unpacking them and sorting them out and figuring out why it happened. But when you have a grown grown man at the table, a leader, a mentor, as well as a family unit, having this conversation, you can say things like, man, this crappy thing happened today at work where this guy did X, Y, Z. And then my uncle would give me feedback like, oh, maybe it happened because of this. But you know, you just need to brush that off. These things are gonna happen. He was teaching me how to navigate these things, how to navigate these shitty times, these shitty situations that we face all the time. And that's super important. And this is why I want to tell you guys that the 7 p.m. family dinner wasn't just a gathering and having a meal together quietly. It was having these conversations, connecting, communicating. It was mentorship for me. It was learning how to navigate these shitty times, but also appreciating the good times and showing gratitude. It was so powerful. And where I am right now in life, ultimately, I want to have these dinner times with my family and my kids now. One thing that's definitely on the table for me, pun intended, is that it's going to be imperative that when the kids get old enough, we sit together, we have dinner every night, and I talk to them and I ask them how their day was, and I connect and I communicate and I ask them stuff and I help them dissect certain situations that happen throughout the day so that they know how to navigate life, how to go through life day to day. Good things, bad things are going to happen. This is what you take from it. You take the good, you discard the bad. This is how you navigate it. These things happen. It's okay, right? Because I feel like a lot of my anxiety that I've gone through in life is because I didn't know how to navigate things. I didn't know how to deal with certain situations. I didn't know how to talk to someone about it. I didn't have that father figure that showed me the way. So it all stayed inside me, and it built up a lot of anxiety and a lot of anger and a lot of frustration, and I didn't know how to deal with things. So, you know, the second thing is having those 7 p.m. dinners, the structured day, the family connection and communication around these dinner times was so important. And it's definitely something that I've learned that I'm going to carry on now with my family. Okay, the third and the last lesson that I learned from my uncle is to always have a backup plan. Okay, let me tell you a story. So my uncle helped me save up for my first car. He helped me select and buy my first car, which is a 1982 Celica, which was some brown color that he affectionately called terracotta, I think to make sound better. I don't know if that worked, but it was like a brown 1982 Celica. It was manual. Back then, it was kind of like cringe because the design was still kind of, it was quite dated and not in a good way, and it was quite angular, but it was my first car, and it was manual, and I was head over heels in love with it, and I took it everywhere. And he basically taught me how to drive as well and got me on my Earls, and I was off. And he basically made sure I had full insurance coverage on this car. Now, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing back then, and I was a dumbass. And after a few months, I figured, man, if I cancel this insurance by the end of the year, next year I won't have to pay it. I can put the minimal insurance, right, and get that coverage, and I'll save a bunch of cash. So I did that, and I basically, you know, as you can imagine, I had a fucking accident. I bumped someone from behind, and it would cost me like, it was like $1,200 to fix it out of pocket because I didn't have insurance. And back then, that was all the money in the world for me, and I was gutted because I paid it out of pocket. And then eventually, obviously, my uncle found out, and he was so upset, rightly so, and he was devastated and angry because he set me up, he did all the right things, he put full insurance on my car, and I canceled it, and then had an accident and had to pay out of pocket. And he basically was so pissed off. He told me, like, that's why we have insurance. That's why we have a plan B, because in life, shit like this happens. You can be the best driver on earth, right? But if you take your eyes off the road for 1 second and don't focus, or, you know, you're going to bump someone, you're going to have an accident. You know, you can be the best driver in the world, but if someone doesn't see you and they're a shit driver, they have an accident with you. You know what I mean? I mean, this was the worst case. I took my eyes off the road and I bumped someone from behind. It was my fault. You know what I mean? So he taught me that having a plan B in place is so important, because shit happens in life, and you have to be able to have a contingency plan in place to cover your ass, right? And this goes with anything. You need a plan B. You need to have a plan B in place in case something doesn't go your way. You can pivot and you're still kind of covered, right? And these bad things are going to happen on a regular basis. And if you're not prepared, you're going to learn. So there's lessons in life, and you're going to either learn lessons the hard way or the easy way. And if you fuck around, you're going to find out the hard way. And what I really learned at that time was my uncle was trying to protect me and teach me things the easy way. He didn't want me to learn things the hard way. He didn't want me to go through pain and hardship. That's one of the things, that's one of the balances that I learned in life, is that my kids, I really want to protect them from the pain of this world. You know, ideally, I want to bubble wrap them and make sure they don't go through any type of hardship that I had to go through. But when I think about it, it's a fine balance, because they need to go through hardship to develop character, to learn lessons. I mean, the best way you're going to learn a lesson is if you learn it the hard way, okay? Sure, you can learn from other people's mistakes, but it's not until you make the mistake yourself that it really sinks in. And, you know, I want to ideally protect my kids. Naturally, I want to protect my kids from these hardships and the negative consequences in life and pain. But they're going to have to go through these sometimes, and I'm going to have to accept that so that they can develop character, so they can learn and grow in their own way, in the right way. But you still want to have these plan Bs in place and teach them about these things. Don't go out on a whim. Now, I'm not saying, you know, look, certain things in life, you're going to have to take a risk, right? You're going to have to take a risk, whether you're leaving your job because you want to start a business, or you want to go ask a girl out, or whatever it is. There's certain things you got to have, you know, take a risk, take a leap of faith, and hope for the best. But in all other aspects, it's important to have a plan B in place so that you can pivot and so that your ass is covered. So that's the 3 really important things that, looking back on my uncle's life, that he taught me, that really until this day has been like the cornerstone of, the foundation, baseline of me as a man and having strong values and beliefs. So, I'm really appreciative of, the things that he taught me. I wish that I could say goodbye to him before he left, but he left, he basically, his health deteriorated very quickly. I feel like a lot of what my uncle taught me is basically the building blocks of who I am today. I'm super grateful for the time that I spent with him during that time when I lived in Glenfield. The lessons that he taught me helped shape who I am today. He taught me about structure, he taught me about connection, and he taught me about having plans in place so that, I can kind of, have the type of mentality and the mindset that it takes to be the man that I need to be, to support my family, to support my kids, to basically teach my kids to have good values and beliefs. But I want to wrap this up. I really hope you guys could take something from this. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you're notified every time one of my videos pops up. Hope you guys have an amazing day, and I'll chat to you guys next time.